The pentatonic scale is a primary sort of fundamental musical construct. It's been used for centuries. As such, musicians need, a decent command, a good sort of capability around the scale. Guitar players, just like any other scale, learn this construct in a vertical pattern, right? A blob of notes. And as we grow as musicians, it can be hard to break out of these patterns. Now there's a lot of solutions. Clearly the big solution is to play more in a linear fashion. There are a lot of solutions on how to do this out there, including on this channel. There's the linear pentatonics video, the reprogramming pentatonics video, and they all show you how to map the scale in a linear fashion. And that's absolutely the way to go. But taking the time to understand how these two systems function together, and those systems are the fretboard design and the pentatonic architecture, how they map together, like really understanding that and seeing the impact of changing constraints on those systems can be very enlightening. But it also can allow you to come up with your own solutions on how to break out of these boxes. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will learn how to use constraints, simply changing a set of constraints with these two systems, the fretboard and the pentatonic scale, to get wildly different results out of the same grouping of notes. So I'm going to take those examples from the top, just a simple sort of note sequenced phrase, and I'm going to show you how to change the constraints to map it in a linear fashion. It's this kind of like musical archaeology, which is more a function of how to look at the guitar and how to ask questions about the guitar, that allows you to sort of come up with these solutions yourself, rather than having to learn how to map the entire scale, which again sort of makes you a slave to all of the dots. Like, how does the pattern look, right? Where do I put my fingers? These types of explorations are much more about using your eyes and your brain and your hands to find the solutions yourself. Okay, a lot of talk about architecture, constraints, mapping. What is this all about? I played two phrases at the top of this video. I'll just play them again for you now. So you may notice that these are the exact same notes, but they're just mapped on the fretboard completely differently. I'm going to show you why that works. How is that possible? What's going on there? Because we're curious. We want to know what's happening. First things first. We're in A minor. We're using the A minor pentatonic scale, just to give us the ingredients, right? The lick I'm playing here is just a 4-note sequence. And the way that works is that I start on the root and I play 4 notes. Then I go to the next note in the scale and I play 4 notes. Then I go to the next note in the scale, play 4 notes. Next note in the scale, 4 notes. That's basically the whole phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's a little tag at the end. Okay, that sounds pretty good, right? I want to show you what happens when you do something like that in a vertical mapping. It manifests in a very interesting way, and it sets up a very interesting result. Let's just notice that when I play this scale, my index finger plays all the notes on the 5th fret, and my ring and pinky fingers take turns with the other notes on the high side of the scale, right? Let's call that the south side of the scale, and we'll call this the north side of the scale. When I start a 4-note sequence on the south side of the scale, in other words, my index finger, look how it projects onto the neck. 1 note on the E string, 2 notes on the B string, and 1 note on the G string. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I start that same sequence on the next note, I'm on the north side of the scale. I'm on these fingers. I'm starting with my pinky. Watch how the pattern manifests now. It's 2 notes per string, and it only spans 2 strings. Very next note in the scale is back on my index finger. It's going to map exactly the same. 1 note on B, 2 notes on G, 1 note on D. The next one again is on the north side of the scale, starts with my ring finger. Watch what happens. 2 notes per string, 2 strings. Right? That is a result of 4-note mapping on a vertical pattern. It just happens like that. And each one, when you start it on the south side of the scale or the north side of the scale, it changes and it responds to those constraints in a different way. Pretty fascinating. What I'm going to do now is just set 2 constraints. The first constraint is I really only want to play those 2 note per string, 2 string set phrases. So I'm going to always start with either my pinky or my ring finger. The very first thing that does, watch, is makes me leave the position instantly. Right? Cool. The other constraint I'm going to set is that I want to start the phrase on consecutive strings every single time. So I'm going to start the phrase on the E string, then I'm going to find the second note in the scale on the B string, start it from there, then I'm going to go to the G string and then the D string. So watch what happens there. This first note is A, the second note in the scale is G, but I want to find it on the next string. Here it is, G. And I'm just using that north side sort of like ring or pinky finger beginning, right? That sets the constraint of those 2 notes per string on a 2-string set. The next note in the pattern is E, but I need to find it on the G string. There's my 4-note phrase, set of 2 strings, 2 notes per string. The next note in the scale is D. I want to find it on the D string, D on the D, 12th fret. So there it is. Fascinating. How you can just control how a set of notes maps to the fingerboard by just using different constraints. This is the sort of core methodology to really finding fretboard freedom, to really understanding what's going on here. It's not about let's memorize a ton more scales, let's memorize a bunch about music theory, and those are all important things. But looking at the system in this way and saying when I've got a system, a scale, and I've got a system, a fretboard, and I put them together, what is the result? And being curious about that and finding out how that works and how those systems work together gets you the fretboard knowledge through archaeology. You're finding things. You're looking for things. You're setting constraints and running through the results of those constraints. And as you do that, you learn a lot more about this instrument much more quickly. Okay, so there it is. A single phrase from the pentatonic scale. A couple of constraints changed in both systems, and suddenly your results are completely different. And so again, this is much more about the thought process and the curiosity and the sort of archaeology of how to do this rather than the result, right? The result is going to be you're going to be playing in a linear fashion, but the way you get there is through thinking it through and watching these relationships change and being in control of the math of the whole thing. Anyway, I've tabbed all this out. That's on Patreon. That's linked in the description below. Head on over there if you're curious about it. I've also got a couple of other tabs of other licks that do this same thing over there. So if you're really curious, there's a few more examples there. Head on over there if you need it. And any support over there fuels this whole thing, allows me to do this, and I'm very, very grateful. More than just the result of how the lick looks when we're done with it, I really want to get this process out there and see if this ignites a curiosity into you about how to find things on the guitar and how to change those constructs so you actually start to build the solutions that you need rather than just be fed the information. Anyway, I hope you find it helpful, and I'll see you next time.